first and get exclusive deals. So make sure to go to that banner specifically at leakproject.com. LA, it's great to have you on the show with us here at the Leak Project. How the heck are you?
I'm doing good, Rex. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to speak with you. We've talked several times before, and you always bring so much to the table. I really like to pick your brain, man. It's absolutely fantastic. So, with so much going on in the world right now, it certainly seems like we're living in the times that were talked about in Revelation. And with all of the stuff that you're uncovering with this research on the Nephilim, let's dive into that. There's a lot of people that I've talked to before that aren't very well versed in what the Nephilim actually are. So for the people that aren't up to date with that, let's get into that a little bit, and then we'll get into some more detailed stuff.
Sure. Well, I mean, I realize it's a very controversial subject, and it's a controversial passage, but really it shouldn't be. It's just that in the ancient world, thousands of years ago, I think rabbis and the Jewish people, before Jesus came, knew exactly what it was talking about. We have the Jewish historian Josephus, which talks about the Nephilim. There are extra biblical books, which are non-canonical, which talk about the Nephilim. One in particular, of course, the Book of Enoch. So the bottom line is this. When we go to Genesis 3 and we read the narrative there's a statement by the Most High God, which he's addressing Adam and Eve and the serpent. And this is obviously after the fall. And that's a 3-hour discussion because it's a very poignant and pithy statement. Not only that, the weight of that statement sets up, in my opinion, the rest of the biblical prophetic narrative. Everything pivots from this next statement. And I believe it's the pre-incarnate Jesus who is there. And he says this, your seed, talking of the serpent, will be at enmity, at war, striving with the seed of the woman. And here comes the first prophetic passage in our Bibles, in my opinion. He, Messiah, capital H, he will crush your head. You will bruise his heel. Now, the seed of the woman becomes Messiah thousands of years later. Okay, everybody understands that. But what many people won't look at and won't even go down because it can't possibly happen. Oh my gosh. What is the seed of the serpent? When we go over 3 chapters to Genesis 6, we read, the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and they lusted after them. I'm paraphrasing. And they took wives from whomever they wished. And they went into them in the biblical sense. And the progeny, the offspring of this unholy union was in fact the Nephilim. The sons of God, B'nai Ha-Elohim, always refers to the angels. And we see that in the book of Job, which has the same verb things written in the book of Jasher. So it's pointing the reader to go and look these stories up in the book of Jasher. That's what it's talking about. So we know from Josephus that the bones of the Nephilim, which had countenances so large, and they were completely different from normal mortal men, were openly on display at the time of his writing. That's 2,000 years ago. And we also know that Moses, when he's writing the Torah in Genesis 6, at the tail end of that passage, he says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God saw the daughters of men and had children by them. These were the great men of renown. So remember, Moses is writing from Mount Sinai thousands of years after the flood, certainly thousands of years after the garden, the expulsion from the garden. Why wouldn't he just say the Nephilim were on the earth in those days? They were wiped out in the flood. That was it. No more. But that's not what he says. And then he amplifies it, and also afterwards, which means it happened again. And also afterwards means and also afterwards. We can want to tap dance around that all we want, but that's what it means. And then he amplifies it and says, when the sons of God saw the daughters of men and went into them in the biblical sense, took wives and went into them and had children by them, these were the Nephilim, the great men of renown. And we see it with the 5 kings in Abraham. I think Sodom and Gomorrah was completely tainted with fallen angelic nonsense. I don't know to what degree, but it was destroyed except for Lot, who was not tainted with some kind of Nephilim blood. There's a scholar, or I should say, there's a lecturer, a guy that's written a couple of books, and he's trying to tell people that somehow Ham's wife was a Nephilim and got on the ark. There's also some Jewish stories that talks about Og, who somehow clinged to the ark. Look, in my opinion, these stories, while colorful, impugns the character of God, because God and the Most High God says in two places in Genesis 6, and I think the second place is in 7, but I might be wrong. He says, Noah, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. That, in my opinion, is a vetting process, because he says it twice, and he's calling it out. Noah, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. If Ham's wife is a Nephilim, or anybody else that gets on that ark, then somehow that impugns the character of God, because God's wiping out the entire earth. I'm going to leave one Nephilim on board just for the heck of it. It's nonsense. The other thing is, a Nephilim, in my opinion, is in a fixed state. They hate people. They hate human beings. So the idea that Ham's wife is a Nephilim, in my opinion, falls short in so many ways, and just it collapses of its own weight. And again, this researcher, I know this guy. He's a great guy. I like him. He's a friend. But I think he's completely way out on this, and so do other people, which is why other people, prophetic voices, have distanced themselves from this man. And he refuses. He just invented this. No one else has ever said this. It's his little bailiwick, and fine, so believe what you want to believe, but it causes great confusion. And the reason why I've separated myself and talk about it so vociferously, it causes great confusion, and it impugns the character of a just, holy, righteous God, who somehow, even though after calling out, Noah, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives, allows a Nephilim to go on board. That's a trickster. That's nonsense. That's craziness, in my opinion. So the Nephilim come back. The seed of the serpent will be at enmity with the seed of the woman. We read in 2 Thessalonians, the son of perdition. Do we really think that the Antichrist, the one instead of Messiah, the one who comes, another will come in his name, right? That's what it says. Another will come in his name. Do we really think that the seed of the serpent has not stopped manifesting through the thousands and thousands of years? In my opinion, it has not. He's constantly trying to create man in his own image, and the Antichrist, in my opinion, will be the literal seed of the serpent.
Well, now, if you get into the seed of the serpent and what the Nephilim actually looked like, I know that you've pulled some really cool bones and skeletal remains of what looks like cone heads, elongated skulls, and I've seen two types of elongated skulls. I've seen the ones that look like they were done by people using some type of, I don't know what, straps or something to actually create it over years and years and years. And then there's others that look like they're naturally that way. So it would make me think that people that saw those that had these skulls maybe, or these certain body types, they looked at them as gods, and then therefore they wanted to mimic them. I don't know. Those are just things that are coming through my mind. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that's what's going on here. Some of this is going to be released in Watchers 10 and the new book Nephilim Hybrids. I mean, it's the information is going to be released. I can't really talk too much about it now, but hopefully you'll have me back when the book and the DVD are released. People need to get this stuff and see it. We have been lied to. This information has been deliberately obfuscated, and I'm not making that up. I mean, deliberately obfuscated by the powers that be, and there's a reason for it, because it goes against, it flies in the face of the Darwinian paradigm. It points back to the biblical narrative and the supernatural, and it points back to the veracity of the biblical narrative. And the Darwinists and the neo-Darwinists don't like that.
Yeah, and when you look at some of the supernatural stuff, how did they get here? And when did they leave? I mean, were they all? They weren't obviously all taken out, right? I mean, because when you read some of the Old Testament stuff, it talks about how God told, I think, Abraham to kill every man, woman, and child of certain bloodlines. And I've asked people why before, and they've told me because that they were tainted or they were evil or Nephilim or hybrids. So is there some truth to that?
Well, I mean, here's the deal. The reason why the mandate, and I've written about this extensively in my book, The Cosmic Chess Match, and sometimes that book is actually being taught at churches. People use it. Pastors will use the Cosmic Chess Match midweek Bible study, which is a real honor for me. I mean, I can't even believe that, but that's what's going on. And the reason for this is the mandate comes out from a loving, holy God of the Bible to wipe every man, woman, child, animal, burn everything. That mandate is given to Joshua and Caleb. Richard Dawkins uses this in his lectures to point to the fact that the God of the Old Testament is a genocidal, maniacal, capricious, warlike, crazy God. And that's what he uses. He uses those scriptures. And you can see he's incensed, and rightfully so. Because when we look at it that way, the God of the Bible does seem maniacal, does seem capricious, does seem genocidal, murderous. He does. Because he's telling Joshua and Caleb to wipe everybody out. This is why it's so important to understand who and what the Nephilim are and were, and the seed war, because that's what it's about. And the reason why the Nephilim tribes are in the Levant, the Holy Land, the Promised Land, the land of Canaan, is because the fallen cherub knows the plan. And he knows what's coming up. And don't ask me how they do this. Again, this is the cosmic chess match. The fallen cherub is not all-knowing, but he has a different perspective of time and space than we do. And there's an analogy I used called the cornfield analogy. And I wish I was smart enough to come up with this, but this was a Holy Spirit thing. And the cornfield analogy is this. Our relationship to space, to the space-time continuum, can be looked upon in this analogy. You're standing in a cornfield, okay? I'm standing in a cornfield. I can see the stalk of corn in front of me, the stalk of corn to the left, to the right, and behind me. That's it. That's my perspective. I have no idea. The corn's 8 feet tall. I have no idea what else is in that cornfield. That's what I see. And that's analogous to the way we go through the space-time continuum here. We see a little bit ahead. What I mean by that is, oh, I'm going to have dinner in an hour. Okay, but we're not really seeing ahead, are we? And we can't go back in the past. We're basically in the now. We're stuck in a river of time, which is moving, which is an illusion, but it is moving constantly forward. And we can't mess with that. We can't jump ahead. We can't hold it or make it go slower. We have no control over the time-space domain. However, the fallen cherub is in a different area of the universe than we are, a different domain, which I call the second heaven. The Bible calls it the second heaven. And in this domain, I believe he has a different perspective of time. For instance, when Satan calls Jesus up, takes him up on top of a mountain, and in an instant of time shows him all the kingdoms of the world. Now, is that literal, or is that just metaphor? The anti-supernaturalist, well, that's impossible. Well, it must be metaphor. No, it's not. It's literal. Because this is what the fallen cherub can do. He has a much greater perspective on time and space than we do. He can see further into the future than a human being. And that's analogous to someone coming up to that cornfield in a shiny red fire truck and rolling up that big extension ladder, climbing to the top of the extension ladder. That guy on top of that, Satan, can see you standing in the cornfield, and several other cornfields around you. That's a much greater perspective of the space-time continuum than we have. Okay? Much, much greater. However, the God of the Bible is in the space shuttle, and he's got a telescopic lens. Not only can he beam down and see the dime that I just dropped out of my pocket in the cornfield, but he can zoom back and see the cornfield, the cornfields that surround it, the state of Missouri, the U.S., and finally the entire globe. His perspective is all-knowing. So we've got three different views: our view, Satan's view, which is a created being, and the God of the Bible. And this is why Hasatan, Satan, can see and understand what's going on in the Promised Land, which is why he puts his troops, the Nephilim, there. That's why they're there. That's the reason why they're there. It's not accidental that they're there, because he has a win. He gets an idea from Abraham that that this Messiah guy, there's something going on with Mount Moriah here. We're not sure what it is, but seems like the old man wants Mount Moriah, wants this area of land. In fact, what's really telling, and again, this is all in the cosmic chess match, the Most High God says to Abraham, and of course I believe it's the pre-incarnate Jesus, that's called a theophany, the pre-incarnate Christ, the pre-incarnate Messiah is there with Abraham. He sends the two other angels, or the two angels, to go to Sodom and Gomorrah and get Lot out, and of course they do that. But meanwhile, the other angel, which I believe is Yeshua, Jesus, hangs out with Abraham. He says, well, Abe, paraphrasing here, you're going to be a great nation. Yep. But it's going to take 400 years. You're going to go down to Egypt. You're going to be slaves about 400 years until, get this, the sin of the Amorites comes into fullness. What the heck does that mean? And that scripture is pregnant with meaning, because it really, in some ways, it gives us, first of all, he tells, how does he know that? How does he know it's going to happen? Well, because he's God and he sees all. And when Jesus is here, he's doing that same stuff. He's calling out the future a priori, and he does it with great specificity. Oh, by the way, you'll go down to Abraham until the sin of the Amorites come. And what is the sin of the Amorites? The Amorites are a Nephilim tribe. And this is why the Most High God of the Bible says that mandate to Joshua and Caleb, because the Nephilim are the progeny of fallen angels and the women of earth, and they are there to thwart the plan of God, to thwart Messiah being born. And you can see what happens. The 12 spies go in, they freak out. Oh, the giants were there, we were like grasshoppers. And I got to tell you, what people don't realize, that if the Nephilim tribes that they encountered were 10, 12 feet tall, and we know Og or Bashan, oh, hold on. We know, sorry, we know that Og, king of Bashan, was at least 12 feet tall.
Feet tall. And do you have those remains? Is that what you guys know, or?
Oh God, are you kidding me? No, those are, well, let's put it this way. We know that Josephus had them, or had the remains of the Nephilim. We don't know whether it was Og or not, or Og. We have no idea. But the bones were openly on display. There is a possibility that the bones in the days of Josephus could have been Og, king of Bashan. That might be a stretch. The bottom line is no. Nobody's got any of this stuff. However, I was able to go to Catalina. And this is all in the work of On the Trail of a Nephilim Volume 2. By the way, I was on the History Channel with this. And last season, it was their season finale. And what was really interesting, that I was allowed access to the archives on Catalina Island. And what I saw in those archives it was sanitized. Everything was in folders, manila envelopes, in museum boxes. Everything was completely reworked, all right? So I had access for 10 hours with the former curator, John Boragina. I discovered elongated skulls, six-fingered skeletons, and the one skeleton that we found showing Ralph Glidden, who was 5'8" in a recently excavated grave, showed a very, very large skeleton, which was just under 9 feet. Now that's real, and it was vetted by 3 different researchers. So I'm not making this stuff up, Rex. I'm not making it up. That's under 9 feet. And I got to tell you, there's a basketball player that I met when I was at Dallas, here the Watchman Conference. And by the way, here I'll be a Prophecy Watchers Conference coming up. It's sold out, but just live streaming. You can go to my website, lamarzulli.net, and sign up for the live streaming. It's going to be incredible. But you can go there, lamarzulli.net, and sign up for the live streaming. All sorts of speakers are going to be there. Bill Salas, Tom Horn, Gary Stearman, Joseph Farr, just to name a few, Bill Kenning. It's going to be packed with some great speakers, and that's coming up July 17th and 18th. Colorado Springs, and live streaming is available. I'll also be here at the Watchman Conference in Knoxville in September. Big conferences, usually they sell out very quickly. And I know Prophecy Watchers Conference in Colorado is sold out. But there was a man that I met at the Dallas, here the Watchman Conference, former basketball player. And this guy was 7 feet tall, okay? I'm 6 feet tall. So it's only a foot difference. And you say to yourself, well, I mean, it's only a foot. Rex, it's a whole different ball game. This guy was only a 7-footer. I looked like a dwarf next to him, and I mean that. I looked like a grasshopper next to this guy. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I show the picture when I'm out speaking, because people have no idea when you say, well, 7 foot, 9 foot. Oh, that's not that big. You want to look what the difference between a 7-footer and a 6-foot man is? Let me show you. Because not only do they go up, but they go out. They're huge. And that's what it was very, very revealing when we saw that.
Well, and then you look at some of the skeletal remains, according to some sources, where they get up to 30 feet. Is there any validation to that, or is that just, is that far out there?
Look, there's no way to vet it. We've heard reports, but there's no way to vet it. So when someone tells me 25, 30 feet, they may be right. I don't know. That certainly is a possibility. Right now, because of my work out in Catalina and the experts, these guys with software that were able to digitize the photograph and then manipulate it in a grid, that's just under 9 feet, 8 foot 9 inches. That's how tall it was. So that's what I'm going with. And that's huge. A 9-footer is really, really a big guy. I think pre-flood, and I agree with Steve Quayle on this, 25, 30 feet, certainly possible. Post-flood, as Chuck Missler would state, they're not getting what they used to get. So they're getting giants, but not as big. And everything changes. So it's 12 to 15 feet. And what's interesting is in Watchers 10, and also the new book, Nephilim Hybrids, we talk about that.
Now, do you think that they're influencing the world right now?
The Nephilim?
The Nephilim, yes.
Yeah. We have a very interesting segment in Watchers 10. Very interesting. I think people will, sort of hopefully be stunned when they see what we've quote unquote uncovered with all that. The fallen angels, I believe, are definitely manifesting. And even though they're way behind the scenes at this point, I think they're influencing certain aspects. The occult is in our face. When you look at Madonna or the Katy Perry halftime show, or even Coldplay this year with Beyonce, and the blatant, overt showing of Baphomet horns with the hand signs, Madonna in your face occult symbolism, Katy Perry riding in on a beast, it's the goddess Ishtar. And this is at the Super Bowl halftime. We are inundated with movies with occult themes. The occult is in our face. It's everywhere. And it begs the question, why? Why the fascination? And in my opinion, it's because of these entities are, you know, Satan is the god of this world, and he doesn't want that relinquished. And I think we're getting to the window of time where things will really start to manifest. Well, they already are. We're already getting reports of people seeing and having encounters of some pretty bizarre things. So we'll see where it goes.
Well, let's jump into that ceremony out there in Switzerland for the opening of the deepest rail tunnel. And there's this just bizarre ceremony at the Goddard Base Tunnel. And I actually watched that, and they had these worker bee type people, and then they did this sacrifice, mock sacrifice of 3 people that then turned into spirits, and the tunnel opened into the abyss, and it was like they were opening up this connection to the other side, what some people might consider the bowels of hell. There's a lot of speculation right now that the return of the 10th planet, or Planet 12, or Nibiru, Wormwood, there's so many names right now that you could put to it. And I used to be a lot more skeptical about Planet X than I am now. I'm still agnostic on the subject, but I've seen some not only good footage and pictures, but then to go even further, some of the stuff that I've actually seen personally on the channel about trolls that leave these weird comments and stuff, and you can tell they're not your typical couch potato troll that just wants to start a scene, but people that are actually very good with psychology and know how to cone people up and say certain things. So that's made me wonder more than just about anything. Plus the earth changes, so there's a talk of the return of Nibiru, also the return of Satan, or there's different names in other cultures. So do you think that there might be a connection there? Do the Nephilim possibly come from this Nibiru planet or Planet X, or do you think that that all is just something way out of reach?
Well, we interviewed Marshall Masters for one of our Watchers films in 2012, right before 2012, so it was 2011. And Marshall Masters is sort of the go-to guy for Planet X, or at least one of the go-to guys for Planet X. And Marshall's a nice guy. I mean, I consider him a friend, an acquaintance. And but Marshall was wrong. I mean, Marshall was absolutely convinced in 2012 Planet X would be seen. Gil Broussard, who we interviewed in Watchers 9, also is sort of a go-to guy when it comes to Planet X. And, you know, Gil's presentations are second to none. He's really done a lot of work on Planet X. And he figured it would either be here by September 2015 or at the latest March 2016. Of course, those dates have come and gone, and now he's recalculating, and oh, the math is wrong. It's going to come in 2017. So what I look at, strange signs in the sky. Jesus tells us that. So that's, we already know. Men faint from fear of what is coming upon the earth. What does that mean? We don't know. We have no idea. What do you mean? Something is coming and it's going to be upon the earth. Is it a mile-wide mothership? Is it an asteroid? You know, is it a bolide? I mean, I don't know. I have no idea what it is, nor does anyone else. It's all speculation. But something is coming, and it's so powerful that men's hearts faint from fear. That's what it says. So, look, there's enough going on this planet without even bringing in Planet X. And that we filmed this with our Days of Chaos film, Watchers 9, Days of Chaos, my book of the same title, Days of Chaos. When we look at the wars and rumors of wars, we look at the crazy earthquakes, the bizarre weather patterns, the idea that the Fukushima reactor has melted down and the fuel rods have melted through the containment. So it's like, that's not going to work. Where are the fuel rods? Well, nobody knows. Isn't that interesting? No one knows where the fuel rods are. When we look at the fish and animal and bird die-off, which is exponential, look at the threat of a supervolcano, Yellowstone, or the Bardabunga in Iceland, just to name two, which are game changers if they really decide to erupt. Lately, people are talking about the San Andreas Fault, very active, seemingly maybe the LA big one's going to, well, let's hope not. Then we look at the tsunamis and the threat of tsunamis, which again, one tsunami, that 9.0 earthquake off the Fukushima prefecture in Japan, crippled the reactors. And now, 5 years later, they have lost, the Japanese government and TEPCO. I have no idea where the fuel rods are to reactor 4. They've gone through the containment shell. Are they burning their way to China? Are they already contaminated the Pacific? We don't know. Afghan war drags on for 15 years. 15 years.
Isn't
with
that
no
just insane?
it's with no end in sight, and there's a reason for it. The only reason why they can do it is because the media never reports on it. So the American people don't know what's going on over there. If the media started to do exposés of the amount of soldiers coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq that are committing suicide, heads would spin.
It's
Heads would spin.
And isn't there just an enormous amount of depleted uranium that's been scattered throughout many parts of the Middle East? And I mean, it's just a complete toxic waste zone in many places out there that those effects could last forever. And not to mention, what's that going to do to the soldiers? And I mean, it's just terrible on both sides. It really is. And I thought to myself before, what would it be like for somebody that grows up on that side of the world that might, be completely peaceful, and then they go to some event and there's a drone strike and it blows up their family, and that would obviously cause a lifetime of anger, especially at birth. So it's just like one of those things that goes on forever. It's that perpetual war base. You came after my family, so I'm going to come after your family. And I wonder if the powers that be, obviously, they know that almost, right? So they create these terrorists and they get people as pissed off as possible to where they go after others. And I don't know. What is your thought on that? Maybe I'm just going too far with that.
Well, I mean, it's, where do you want to start?
Beginning of time, right?
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the Romans, and the Middle East is just one. The whole area is just stained with the blood of innocents, and battles upon armies, and battles and corpses, and the death counts through the roof. And their beliefs still refer to Europeans as the Crusaders. The Crusaders. That's like 1,000 years ago, for crying out loud. The Crusaders. So, look, atrocities on both sides, there's no doubt about it. And this is why Jesus says ethnicity against ethnicity, nation against nation, ethnicity against ethnicity. And that's exactly what we're seeing throughout the Middle East, which, in my opinion, points back to the veracity of the biblical prophetic narrative. And that's why it's so telling and so right on.
And have you been able to keep track of the different revelation trumpets, etc., that are sounded, certain things happen? Can you say with proximity where we're at in Revelation?
I don't think Revelation has started yet. I know that some people believe that. I'm not one of those. I don't believe we are even close to the book of Revelation. We are in what's called the birth pangs, the wars and rumors of wars, the famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, troublesome times. And these are what we've been talking about, this afternoon, this evening. And we addressed it in great detail in Watchers 9 in the book Days of Chaos. And we're not, the vial judgment, nothing's happened yet, in my opinion. These are the birth pangs. They lead up, they give birth to the tribulation. But I am of the firm belief that the church, those who believe in Jesus, are not part of the tribulation. We don't go through that. That's the great escape, and frankly, I can't wait for it.
Okay. And, if we could jump back over to the Nephilim for a minute.
Sure.
Do they have higher IQs typically than the average person? And as far as some of the different abilities that some might look at as metaphysical or magical?
Native American cultures call them the star people. And it's one of the legends says that they could read your mind and tell the future. It's like the mutants that we see in X-Men, the same type of thing. And people look at that and go, I want to be an X-Men. They were giants in Milan, according to Robert Mirabal, a past Pueblo Native American who I interviewed and is in On Material of a Nephilim Volume 1. And Robert Mirabal heard it from his grandfather. They said they were giants in Milan. They came from the stars a long time ago. They could read your mind and tell the future. That's what his grandfather was told by his father or his grandfather, and back and back and back it goes. Yes, they have supernatural powers. No, I don't know to what extent and what the list is. I wish I did. But one thing is for certain, they had supernatural powers. And as you will see in Watchers 10, and also in the new book, Nephilim Hybrids, we believe that they may be here again. They may already be here, and we have evidence of that, which we'll show in Watchers 10.
Do they have longer lifespans?
That's a really good question. And Rex, here's the problem with this. We don't know.
Right.
Is it possible that the Nephilim can live for thousands of years? Right? We don't know. When it says Og or Og, the last of the Rephaim, the last of the giants, well, the Nephilim, are only in that. Gotta love the iPhone here.
Oh yeah.
There are many Nephilim tribes in that area. The Nephilim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Zamzumims, the Emims. Okay, stop already. Jeez. Unbelievable. The Emims. I mean, there's a whole host of Nephilim tribes all through the Levant. But it says Og was the last of the Rephaim. The Rephaim are a Nephilim tribe, not certainly all of a Nephilim. And, Og or Og probably didn't make it. But, look, Goliath, in my opinion, Nephilim. Was he 9 feet? Was he 12 feet? I mean, people look at this and they don't understand the Nephilim and they try to dumb it down. Oh, he was exaggerated. He was really only 7 feet. But that's not what the Bible says. That's not what the Bible says. It's not what Josephus tells us. And again, my work on Catalina Island, we discovered 2 9-footers. And that's, who knows how old those things were. And what happened to the skeletons, for crying out loud, right? So it's very, very interesting.
Now, another thing, too, that I've wondered, are there certain places that you find more of their remains, like skeletal remains?
The fact that we found, or I discovered photos out on Catalina Island, I think is extremely telling. Extremely telling. But there's not like a place where you can go. We've got several archaeological sites which we're trying to, and one of the sites, in fact, we have been digging in, private property in Ohio. But, there's no one place you can go. When we go to Paracas, that's where we see the elongated skulls. And we believe, it's been my hypothesis that the Paracas people arrived there about 3,000 to 3,500 years ago. They did not originate in Paracas. They arrived there from another part of the world. And you'll see the results of that in Watchers 10 in the new book, Nephilim Hybrids.
Do you think that they had a big impact, or actually maybe orchestrated the pyramids and many of these wonders of the world like Machu Picchu and stuff? Or
well, yeah, there's two dynamics here. One, or 2 points to consider. One point is what happened before the flood. The other point is what happens after the flood. So there's pre-flood, what I would call fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture, and then there's post-flood, fallen angel technology, Nephilim architecture. The pre-flood stuff is, in my opinion, Sacsayhuaman, the Great Pyramid of Egypt, and other places, Ollantaytambo. Post-flood, we're looking at Chichen Itza, the Great Circle in Mexico, the Great Circle Mound in Ohio, Corral, which is in Peru, which is the oldest city in the Americas, North, Central, and South. When we look at Teotihuacan in Mexico, just outside Mexico City, post-flood. But the knowledge that comes down to build these structures, and the manpower, it's like, wait a second, how are they doing this?
Do you think CERN is being used as a portal to possibly bring these Nephilim in?
Well, I think just like the Tower of Babel, Remember, Jesus says it'll be like the days of Noah when he returns. And what's interesting, of course, the days of Noah include the days Noah was alive during the Tower of Babel. So, not only does Noah see the flood, but he sees God come down and say, well, we're not doing this again, right? And they confuses the language. And what's interesting here, Rex, and this is in the book, the new book, Nephilim Hybrids, excuse me, which I find, let me get a slurp here, which I find really interesting.
Uh-huh.
There's a scripture in Genesis where it says they built with brick instead of stone. They built with brick instead of stone. Why does the Holy Spirit find that so important? And in my opinion, because they have lost the technology. They've lost the connection that they had with the fallen angels. Whatever, the gateway was shut. And so they're building Babel, the tower, in an attempt to open the gateway, open the portal, let the old gods through. I think CERN may be doing exactly the same thing.
Have you heard of Daryl Sims?
Yeah.
He's done a lot of research in the alien abduction phenomenon. He claims that he's been abducted. His son, he used to work with the CIA, and now he does a lot of hypnotherapy, regressions and such, implant removal, or he's a part of the process, I guess. And he thinks that these ETs, whether they're greys or reptilians or mantises or Nordics, he calls them different models. And he says the Nordics are like the Corvette. And he thinks they're all basically cloned. And then we got into that. I've interviewed him a couple of times, and so don't quote me on this totally. You'd have to go back to these interviews. But I remember the majority of them, and he seemed to me that he said something about how he thought they were all cloned in like this enormous spaceship, or many of them were cloned in this enormous spaceship that kind of hovers on the outskirts of the solar system, and because they don't have belly buttons. And I asked him, okay, well, who's making them? And he didn't really know, but I think he's kind of under the impression that the fallen angels are the ones kind of pulling the strings at the top levels. At least that's kind of what I gathered.
Yeah, whether he, look, there's a lot of us in this, and we all borrow from each other. When I came up with this, which was, years and years ago, I called David Flynn, who unfortunately passed away from us several years back. I said, David, I've been mulling this over for months, and sort of walking up to the line and then jumping back from it because it was just too bizarre. I said, is it possible that the grays that we see are some sort of a biologically created suit that the demons inhabit? He said, yeah, that's what I believe too. And that's years ago. In other words, Satan is a super scientist. He's got the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, which are roaming the earth. They're earthbound. And so what he does, he creates a biological avatar so the demons can inhabit something, because a demon can't manifest in this dimension unless he's in something. So he possesses the suit. He goes into the suit, and that's why there's no belly buttons and they look what they look like. That's so, Sims is right on, in my opinion, with his assessment. Bully for Daryl. I would just add to that it's the work of the fallen angels.
And then there's the Rh negative phenomenon, and I've done a little bit of research into it, where many times people that have that blood type will have the extra vertebrae at the bottom of the spine that looks almost like a little tail. They are immune to some things, certain viruses and stuff that other people aren't. And then they're also more allergic to other stuff. If a mom gets pregnant and the baby inside of her doesn't have the same blood type, then the body will actually attack that. So then they have that very controversial vaccine to offset those effects and stuff. And a lot of people think that the Rh negative bloodline is from the seed of what you're talking about, the seed of Satan possibly. And others say, no, there's really nothing to it. Where your research has led you, LA, where would you say the Rh negative bloodline falls into the whole mix?
Well, you got to be real careful with the Rh negative stuff. there was actually a woman that I played golf with, and she was just, she just joined our twosome one day, and we had a threesome, and she was the third person, and she worked. Basically, I'm not sure exactly her title, but she worked with blood and in a hospital. And I said, well, what's the deal with Rh negative? And she just, rattled off, well, it's this, it's rare, it's an Rh person can't get this type of blood. But a lot of people make a real big deal about Rh negative blood. And I just think that's another rabbit hole to go down, because now we're going to start eliminating everybody with Rh negative blood. And I don't think that's the case here. I mean, I really don't.
You know what I have noticed, though, because I have several friends that have that blood type, and they are very into that specific bloodline. They've got these really strange anomalies oftentimes. Many of them are multiple lifetime contactees, been abducted their whole lives. Their parents have been abducted. Their grandparents have been abducted. A lot of times they'll be in certain rooms, and they get upset. The lights will start to flicker. Electronics will act weird. Computers will shut down. The fuse will pop, and then they talk about their family ties to some of the aristocratic bloodlines, and I find that very fascinating. Also, the ESP abilities seem to be a little bit stronger with that blood type. So I wonder if maybe it's just because certain people that have had different parents and stuff, their parents were more astute in certain things, so that just kind of passing on from generation to generation, or maybe there's something to it, because I certainly don't think that they're evil by any means. I mean, they're great people. Sure. So I'm not trying to put that out there, because I mean some great friends that I have the Rh negative bloodline. I just wonder if there might be some type of genetic manipulation or something that was more influenced with a certain factor at a particular time. Again,
I'm not. I've done some research into it, but certainly I'm not an expert on that, and would just, I don't know. I mean, I think that there's some bigger fish to fry. If there's an outside force agency manipulating the human genome, then if there is, we should see vestiges of that. And that's why the Paracas elongated skulls and our work there, plus what I found on Catalina Island and other creatures, and it's in the Watchers 10 trailer. I mean, something's going on here. Something's going on, and I think people need to wake up.